It's May 1977, and Kimberly Fritz, and one 8-year-old girl from Ann Arbor, Michigan, has just done something that takes a lot of people their whole lives to work up the courage to do. She moved to California. No job lined up, no one waiting for her. She just packed what she had, pointed herself west, and went, because she was 18. And when you're 18, California feels like a promise. 4 months later, in September of that same year, a 31-year-old mother of 3 named Velvet Sanchez is trying to figure out her next chapter. She just left her job at the Navy Exchange. 3 kids at home, a lot on her plate, but she was still going, still figuring it out, the way mothers do. And then 4 months after that, right after Christmas, December 1977, a 21-year-old named Lorraine Rodriguez doesn't come home to her 2 children, 3 women, 3 separate lives, 3 separate stories, all of them playing out across Ventura County, California, across 7 months in 1977. And here's the thing I need you to understand right now, before I tell you anything else. None of them knew each other, but there was one man who knew all 3 of them, and for 47 years he got away with it. Stay with me, because this story is long overdue. Welcome to Buried Verdict. I tell stories about people who deserve better and the ones who finally, sometimes decades too late, got justice. Tonight we're going to Ventura County, 1977, and we're gonna meet 3 women who should still be here. If you're new here, kindly subscribe, like, and share. Also, tell us if you have heard about this before. Okay, so Ventura County, California, 1977. I want you to picture this place because it matters. This isn't Los Angeles. It's not the glamorous California most people think of when they think California. Ventura County in 1977 was working class, real. It was oil fields and citrus farms and fishing harbors. It was Port Hueneme, a Navy town. Cargo ships coming and going, people who got up early and worked hard and didn't ask for much. It was Oxnard, a city that was still figuring out what it wanted to be. Bigger than a town, but not quite a city yet, with motels along the main boulevards that catered to truckers and seasonal workers and anyone passing through on the way to somewhere else. It was the kind of place where people still left their front doors unlocked. And 1,977 inches. America, I mean, think about the world these women were living in. Star Wars had just come out that May. Elvis Presley died in August, and the whole country just stopped for a moment. Fleetwood Mac's Rumors was on every radio and every diner in America. People were still exhaling from Vietnam, still trying to find their footing after Watergate. There was this feeling in a lot of communities that things were getting better, that the worst was behind everyone. In Ventura County, life had a rhythm to it. You knew your neighbors, you waved at people on the street, you let your kids walk to school. The idea that something genuinely terrible could happen here, not somewhere else, not in a bigger city, but here, that wasn't something most people had made space for. That's the world Kimberly Fritz drove into when she came from Michigan. That's the world Velvet Sanchez was raising her 3 kids in. That's the world Lorraine Rodriguez was building a life in, as a 1-year-old mother. And somewhere in that same world, a 6-year-old man named Warren Luther Alexander was driving his 18-wheeler through Ventura County. He had a long-haul trucking route, which meant different town every night, different motel, cash transactions, no routes anywhere, no one who could say exactly where he'd been or when. He wasn't suspicious looking. He wasn't someone people avoided. He was just a trucker passing through. Nobody paid attention to him. That was the whole point. Now let me introduce you to the 3 women at the center of this story. Because before I tell you what happened to them, I want you to know who they actually were. So, Kimberly Carol Fritz was 18 years old, the youngest of the 3 women. She was one of 3 sisters, grew up in Ann Arbor, Michigan, went to the University of Michigan for a stretch, and then did what a certain kind of brave, restless, 18-year-old does. She left. Not because anything was wrong at home, not because she was running from something. She moved to California because she was young, and she wanted to see what her life could look like under a different sky. If you've ever been that age and felt that pull, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The feeling that your real life is somewhere out ahead of you, and you just have to go find it. Kimberly was in the first weeks of being a Californian when she died. She hadn't even had enough time to figure out which coffee shop she liked best. Velvet Ann Sanchez was 31. And the first thing I want to say about Velvet is that she was a mother. 3 children. A mother of 3 at 31, trying to work out her next move. She'd recently left her job at the S, Navy exchange. And she was figuring out what came next. That's a specific kind of pressure that a lot of people will recognize. The weight of being the person your kids rely on while you're also trying to hold your own life together. Velvet was carrying that, and she was still going. Her name Velvet is one of those names that feels chosen with love, warm, soft, something that belonged in someone's house, someone's family, someone's story that was supposed to go on much longer. Her children were young when she died. They grew up without her. And Lorraine Ann Rodriguez was 21 years old. She had a son and a daughter, both small, both little, both completely dependent on her. And by every account, Lorraine showed up for them. Her family described her later as a loving and devoted mother who loved spending time with her kids. 21 years old, devoted mother, someone who, by her own family's words, made being a mom the center of her world. Think about who you were at 21. Think about how much life was still in front of you. Lorraine had all of that in front of her too. I always take time with this part of these stories because I think it matters. It would be easy for me to gloss over Kimberly and Velvet and Lorraine and jump straight to what happened. A lot of true crime does that. It treats the victims as a starting point for the investigation, a body to be found, a case to be solved. But Kimberly was a sister and a daughter and a girl from Michigan who wanted to see California. Velvet was a mother who was still fighting for her kids even when things got hard. Lorraine was 21 years old and her children needed her. They were not a starting point. They were the whole story. Now I'm going to take you through what investigators believe happened in the last days of each of these women's lives. And I want to be clear, some of this is reconstructed from evidence and court testimony, not from the women themselves. So I'll tell you what we know, and I'll tell you where the gaps are. Let's start with Kimberly. In the 29th of May, 1977, Kimberly was at the Marvin Motel on Hueneme Road in Port Hueneme. That motel, and this is important to understand, was a transient place. Truckers, workers, people in between one thing and the next. It was the kind of motel where nobody asked too many questions and nobody remembered too many faces. She was found in room 18. She had been strangled with her own clothing. She was 18 years old. Investigators, when they arrived at that room, found something else, something small, something most people would have walked past without a second thought. A fingerprint on the inside door handle of Kimberly's Plymouth, a right ring finger, an unknown, not hers. At the time, that fingerprint had no name attached to it. It was collected, bagged, filed, and it sat. 4 months pass. It's September now, the 8th of September, 1977. Velvet Sanchez is at the Villa Motor Court Motel on South Oxnard Boulevard in Oxnard. This, again, is a motel along a main boulevard, the kind of place you drive past 50 times and never really look at. Witnesses would later tell investigators that they saw Velvet go into a motel room with a man, an adult man. They didn't think much of it at the time. They never saw her come out. When police found Velvet, she had been strangled. Same as Kimberly, same method, same type of location. And her body, and this is something investigators noted, immediately had been arranged in a specific way. Deliberately. It wasn't random, it was a signature. Velvet Sanchez was 31 years old. She had 3 kids at home who needed her. She did not go home. And then the 27th of December, 1977, 3 days after Christmas, Lorraine Rodriguez's body was found near a bridge on Laguna Road in the unincorporated part of Ventura County. That stretch of road is rural, the kind of place between places. It's not where anyone lives. It's not where anyone goes, unless they're going specifically there. Investigators believe she was killed at a motel, somewhere more private, somewhere with a door that closed and then driven out to Laguna Road and left there. Same method, same signature, same absolute disregard for who this woman was. Lorraine was 21 years old. Her son and daughter were at home. They were waiting for her. 3 women, May, September, December, 7 months. 1 county, 1 man who by December 27th had already gotten back in his truck and driven away. Here's the thing about the detectives who worked these cases in 1977. I want you to understand something about them before we go any further. They knew, not who did it, but they knew these cases were connected. 3 women, same county, same year, same method, same way the bodies were arranged. That is not a coincidence. That is a pattern. And the investigators working these 3 separate cases, Port Hueneme PD, Oxnard PD, and the Ventura County Sheriff's Office, they saw that pattern. There was even a 4th case some investigators were looking at. A woman named Cassandra Lee Miller, killed in October 1,975 inches to Ventura County. Similar victim profile, similar method, similar scene. 2 years before Kimberly, some detectives believed, even back then, that they were looking at the same person across multiple crimes. They weren't wrong, but here's the problem they were up against. It's 1,977. There is no DNA profiling that technology won't exist for another 8 years. There's no national database they can run evidence through. There's no CODIS. That system doesn't get established until 1998. What they have is fingerprints, physical evidence, witness testimony, and legwork. And what the man who did this has is a truck and a route that crosses state lines, and no fixed address in Ventura County. He doesn't live there. He doesn't have neighbors there, or a regular diner he eats at, or a face that people recognize. He came through, he killed, he drove away. And in 1977, that was almost enough to make you invisible. The witness from the Villa Motor Court, the one who saw Velvet go into that motel room with a man they were interviewed, a composite sketch was made, a description was circulated. It was a real lead. Investigators followed it. They followed everything they had. They came close, a few times, to something that felt like a door opening. And then the door would swing shut because the man they were looking for had already left. He'd moved on. Different highway, different state, different life. Meanwhile, and this is the part that stays with me, that fingerprint from Kimberly Fritz's Plymouth was sitting in an evidence file, perfectly preserved, waiting. In 1977, a fingerprint without a match is just an object. It doesn't tell you anything unless you have something to compare it to. And Warren Luther Alexander's fingerprints were not in any system that the Ventura County investigators could access. So the fingerprint waited. By the late 1970s, the active investigation on all 3 cases had slowed. Not stopped, slowed. Detectives transferred, budgets got redirected, new cases came in. The files for Kimberly, Velvet, and Lorraine didn't get thrown away. They didn't get closed, but they got quieter. And Warren Luther Alexander kept driving. Here's what was happening while those files sat on a shelf in Ventura County. Warren Luther Alexander moved on. He was 26 years old when he killed Kimberly Fritz in May 1977. By the time 1978 arrived, he was somewhere else entirely. Over the following years and decades, he eventually settled in Diamond Head, Mississippi. He had neighbors, he lived an ordinary-looking life, he got older, and nobody in Ventura County knew where he was. But here's the thing about a man like Warren Alexander. 1,977 was not the only time. In 1992, 15 years after Lorraine Rodriguez was left on Laguna Road, a woman named Nona Cobb was found strangled near Interstate 77 inches, North Carolina, 29 years old. Her body dumped alongside a highway. The same method, the same absolute absence of remorse. Nona Cobb's case also went cold. And Warren Alexander kept living his life. When I say he kept living his life, I mean that in the most literal sense. He woke up every morning in a house in Diamond Head, Mississippi. He had a routine. He probably went to the grocery store, watched TV, maybe talked to his neighbors. He aged from a 26-year-old trucker into a man in his 40s, 50s, 60s. He became someone who looked from the outside like a perfectly normal old man. And Kimberly's sisters were living without her. And Velvet's 3 children were growing up without their mother. And Lorraine's son and daughter had no explanation for why the person who loved them most just never came home one December. All of that is happening at the same time. Alexander in Mississippi, 3 families in California carrying a grief that had no resolution, and 3 case files in Ventura County that nobody had thrown away. That last part matters more than it sounds, because somewhere in those files, in a property room that survived budget cuts and building moves, and 46 years of institutional change, the biological evidence from those 3 crime scenes was still there. The fingerprint from Kimberly's car was still there. DNA collected from Velvet Sanchez's case in 1977 was still there. Nobody knew yet that those things were about to matter more than almost anything else in this case. I want to stop here for a minute, because before we get to the part of this story where things start to move again, I think we owe it to these 3 families to sit in what 47 years of no answer actually feels like. 47 years is not an abstract number. 47 years is Kimberly's sisters getting married, having their own children, watching those children grow up, and every single year, on May 29th, feeling the same thing they felt the day they found out she was gone. 47 years is Velvet's 3 kids doing every major thing children do without their mother in the room. First days of school, graduations, their own weddings maybe, their own children, and through all of it, a question that never goes away, that never gets answered. Who did this to her, and why is he still out there? 47 years is Lorraine's son and daughter going through their whole lives with a story that doesn't have an ending, with a mother who was loving and devoted and present and then wasn't, and no one could ever tell them why. There's something specific about unsolved cases that people on the outside don't always understand. It's not just the grief of losing someone. That grief is there in any death, any loss. What makes an unsolved case different is the way it holds you in the moment it happened. You can't move forward from a thing that isn't finished. You're always partly still standing there in that police station, in that waiting room, at that funeral where you know something isn't right and you don't know what to do about it. And the world just keeps going around you. Oxnard Police Chief Jason Benitez said something when Alexander was finally arrested in 2024 that I think captures this as well as it can be captured. He said, "These murder cases have literally spanned generations through generations of detectives. Many of the detectives and officers that initially responded to these cases are either long since retired or some have passed on. The people who first answered those calls, the ones who first looked at those crime scenes, many of them never got to see what happened next. They carried this case into their retirements. Some of them carried it to their graves. And the families waited. What else can you do? You wait. You keep the memory alive. You keep telling people who they were. You keep hoping that someday, even if you can't imagine how someday someone is going to call." February 2023, the Ventura County Sheriff's Cold Case Unit opens a box. Inside that box is evidence collected from 3 murder scenes in 1977. Evidence that has been sitting, preserved, cataloged, never thrown away for 46 years. And the investigators who open it are asking a very specific question. What can we do with this now that nobody could do in 1977? The answer in 2023 is almost everything. Because here's what changed. In 2022, a year before Ventura County reopened these files, Warren Luther Alexander was arrested in North Carolina, not for the Ventura County murders, for the 1,992 murder of Nona Cobb. That 30-year-old case had finally broken open, and Alexander was in custody. And when you're arrested, your DNA gets collected. And your DNA gets entered into CODIS, the national database that law enforcement agencies across the country use to compare biological evidence from crime scenes against known offenders. So Alexander's DNA profile went into the database. And CODIS started quietly doing what CODIS does: comparing, searching, looking for matches. What came back stopped people in their tracks. The DNA from Velvet Sanchez's case, collected in 1977, stored for 46 years, matched Warren Luther Alexander. And when the forensic scientist who analyzed it testified at Alexander's preliminary hearing, she read out the statistical probability. She said it was 1.78 quintillion times more likely that the DNA was a mixture from Velvet Sanchez and Warren Alexander than from Velvet Sanchez and an unknown contributor. And she paused, and she said, "Quintillion is 18 zeros." And then there was the fingerprint. The right ring finger, lifted from the inside door handle of Kimberly Fritz's Plymouth in May 1977, the one that had no name for 46 years. They ran it against Alexander's known prints. It was his. Warren Luther Alexander had been inside Kimberly Fritz's car. I want you to think about what that means for a second. That fingerprint was sitting in an evidence file since 1977. And the whole time, all 46 of those years, it had a name attached to it. The investigators just didn't have the tools to read it yet. The answer was always there. On the 6th of August, 2024, Warren Luther Alexander, now 73 years old, already in custody in North Carolina, was extradited to California. He was walked off a plane. He was transported to the Ventura County Jail. He was held without bail. He is charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder: Kimberly Fritz, Velvet Sanchez, and Lorraine Rodriguez. And there's more. When District Attorney Eric Nasarenko made the announcement in August 2024, he said something that hasn't left me. He said that investigators believe Alexander may be responsible for additional killings in other states. The FBI's Highway Serial Killings Initiative, established specifically to investigate crimes where victims are found along highways and interstates, cases where the killers are often long-haul truckers moving across state lines, is now actively involved in Alexander's case. Which means there may be more names. More families who've been waiting decades for a phone call they don't even know is coming. And there's Cassandra Lee Miller, the woman killed in Ventura County in October 1975, 2 years before Kimberly. The case that some detectives always believed was connected. Investigators are still actively looking at whether Alexander is responsible for her death too. This story may be bigger than anyone has fully understood yet. So where are we right now? Warren Luther Alexander pleaded not guilty to all 3 charges at his August 2024 arraignment. In October 2024, after a 3-day preliminary hearing, 13 witnesses, 3 DNA analysts, a fingerprint examiner, 5 investigators from the original 1,977 cases, a judge ruled that he would stand trial. As of this recording, trial is scheduled to begin in March 2025. The prosecution is seeking life in prison without the possibility of parole. He's 73 years old. The DA's office has said the death penalty isn't practical given the age of witnesses and the decades since the crimes. But life without parole, for a man his age, means he dies in prison, if convicted. And in North Carolina, the case involving Nona Cobb, the 1,992 murder that first put Alexander in custody, is also working its way through the legal system. DA Nasarenko stood in front of cameras in August 2024 and said, "These murders may have occurred 47 years ago, but the investigators never gave up. They never gave up seeking justice for these 3 victims and their loved ones and their families. Just because the case has gone cold does not mean it should ever be forgotten." He's right. It should never be forgotten. And here's the thing that strikes me most when I think about this case. Nobody threw anything away. That's what made this possible. Someone, back in 1977, bagged that fingerprint and labeled it correctly and put it in a box. Someone made sure that biological evidence was preserved. Someone, every time there was a budget cut or a building move or a reason to let things go, made sure those files stayed intact. That's not nothing. That's a quiet kind of faith that justice is still coming even when you can't see how. I want to close with the 3 of them, not with Alexander, not with the science or the courtroom or the verdict that's still coming. With Kimberly and Velvet and Lorraine, who are the reason any of this matters. Kimberly Fritz was 18 years old. She moved to California because she believed her best life was somewhere ahead of her. She had 2 sisters who loved her. She had all the ordinary, specific, irreplaceable things that make a person a laugh, a voice, a way of being in a room that belonged only to her. She should have had decades more. She had weeks. Velvet Sanchez was 31 years old. She was a mother who kept showing up for her kids even when things were hard. She had 3 children who needed her every single day. She should have been there for all of it. The school plays, and the heartbreaks, and the moments when her kids became adults and started families of their own. She wasn't, and the reason she wasn't is because a man chose to take her life like it was his to take. Lorraine Rodriguez was 21 years old, devoted mother. Her family's words, not mine, and the fact that her family still had those words to offer decades later tells you everything about the kind of person she was. She had a son and a daughter who are now adults who've lived their entire conscious lives without their mother. That is a loss that doesn't have a size. It just is. 47 years is a long time to wait. And I know that a trial, even a conviction, doesn't give back what was taken. It doesn't unring that bell. It doesn't give Kimberly her California life, or give Velvet's children their mother, or give Lorraine's kids the childhood they deserve to have with her in it. But it does something. It says, clearly, in public, on the record, we know what you did, we know who they were, and we did not forget them. Kimberly Fritz, Velvet Sanchez, Lorraine Rodriguez. If this story stayed with you, share it. Not for this channel, for them. So their names travel further than the county where they were taken. Leave a comment if you want to talk about the case, or if you know anything about similar unsolved murders along American highway corridors from this era. The FBI's Highway Serial Killings Initiative is still actively investigating potential additional victims. And if you're new here, kindly subscribe, like, and share. There are more stories that need to be told. Also, kindly tell us where you're watching from, and if you have heard this case before. I'll see you in the next one.